Hello students. So we have reached the last part of chapter 2, which I will cover in this presentation, chapter 2.8, where I will discuss analysis of data, quantitative method and qualitative method, limitations of psychological inquiry, ethical issues, and on the last slide there are some questions for you all to solve. Analysis of data. So far, we have come to know that in research, the researcher needs to collect data with various methods as per requirement and finally have to draw a conclusion, isn't it? So this requires analysis of data where generally two methodological approaches are used. First is quantitative method and second is qualitative method. And now here I have prepared for you the slide so that it also becomes easy for you to make out the differences. Okay. So when we say quantitative method, it generally uses numbers, quantity. Okay. So on the basis of psychological tests, questionnaires, structured interviews, etc., which contain a series of close-ended questions, researchers calculate an aggregate score. You all know now what are close-ended questions, isn't it? Under qualitative method, it generally uses words. So human experiences are very complex as we know, and they cannot be simply measured on the basis of question. For example, if a mother loses her child, we cannot measure her suffering. We cannot use certain quantity of numbers or rating scales over there in order to understand. So therefore there is narrative analysis, which is one of the qualitative methods to analyze such data. Quantitative method is concerned with behavior and qualitative method is concerned with meanings. Quantitative method, it begins with hypothesis, and qualitative method, it induces hypothesis from data. This is one of the most important difference between quantitative and qualitative method. Quantitative method is basically surrounded by generalizations. So for the purpose of drawing conclusions, a researcher may compare individuals' score with that of the group or compare the scores of two groups. Under qualitative method, when the researcher uses the method of participant observation or unstructured interview, the data are generally in a descriptive form. That means in participants' own words, field notes taken by the researchers, photographs, etc. So this type of data cannot be converted into scores or subjected to statistical analysis. Quantitative method, it is very objective in nature, whereas qualitative method, it is very subjective in nature. Okay? But quantitative and qualitative methods are not contradictory. Rather, they are complementary to each other. So in order to understand a phenomenon in its totality, a suitable combination of both methods is justified. Of course, we cannot say that we can use only the quantitative method or we can use only the qualitative method. In very rare cases, only one method is used, but in most of the cases, there is combination of quantitative as well as qualitative method together in order to justify and reach to a conclusion. Let us see some of the limitations of psychological inquiry. So some general problems faced by psychological measurement are: number one, there is lack of true zero point. Now when we say lack of true zero point, in physical sciences, measurements do not start from zero. You all know or not that thing, of course. So for example, if you want to measure the length of the table, you can measure it starting from zero and can say it is 3 feet long. Now it is not same for psychological measurements, because psychological measurements, they do not have a true zero point. For example, no person in this world has zero intelligence. Yes, so all of us have some degree of intelligence. Now, what psychologists do is that they arbitrarily decide a point as 0 point and then proceed further. As a result, whatever scores we get in psychological studies, we are not absolute in nature. Rather, they have relative value only. Okay, so in some of the studies, rather uh, the 0 point ranks are used as scores. For example, on the basis of marks obtained in some test, the teacher arranges the students in an order. Yes, 1, 2, 3, 4, and so on. So the problem in such type of assessment is that the difference between first and second rank holders may not be the same as is the difference between the second and third rank holders. So out of 50, suppose the first rank holder might score 48 and the second is 47 and the third is 40. As you can see, the difference between the first and the second rank holder is not the same as is the case between second and the third rank holders. So this also illustrates the relative nature of the psychological measurement. Okay. Second, it is relative nature of psychological tools. That means in psychological tests, it is developed keeping in view the salient features of a particular context. So for example, a test developed for urban students may contain items that demand familiarity with the stimuli available in the urban setting. That is multi-storied buildings, airplanes, metro, railway, etc. So such a test is not suitable for use with children living in tribal areas or rural areas who would not be more at ease with items that describe their flora and fauna. And similarly, a test developed in the Western countries may or may not be applicable in the Indian context. Such test needs to be properly modified and adapted, keeping in view the characteristics of the context in which they are to be used. Third, subjective interpretation of qualitative data. So the data which can be categorized or quantified in scores or ranks runs the risk of subjective, that means individual or personal interpretation. Now, every researcher may give different meanings to data. Yes, because the researcher himself or herself is a human being, is an individual, and every individual is unique and they have their own interpretations. Yes, they give their own meanings. So it is therefore often suggested that in case of qualitative studies, the fieldwork should be done more than one investigator. It should be done by more than one investigator who at the end of the day should discuss their observations and arrive at an agreement before giving it a meaning. And it is better off if the respondents too are involved in such meaning making process. That means we should also call the respondents who have given us the information, and in order to better reach a result, we should ask the respondent that what the respondent meant when he or she was giving his or her responses. Okay, so these are the three basic limitations of psychological inquiry. Now let us see some of the ethical issues that rest with psychological research, because as we know the psychological research is concerned with human behavior. The researcher is expected to follow certain ethics, that means moral principles, while conducting the studies, and the researcher must always remember these ethical issues. Number one, voluntary participation. So this principle states that the persons on whom you want to conduct the study should have the choice to decide whether to participate or not to participate in the study. So the participants should have the freedom to decide about their participation without any coercion or excessive inducement, and the freedom to withdraw from the research without penalty once it has begun. So that means one should not threat, the researcher should not threat any participant that you should participate, otherwise I may harm you. Such kind of threats should not be there. And the participant should have freedom to withdraw from the study anytime. Even if the study begins, the participant has given his or her consent that he or she will be doing the study and will be a subject. But then at certain point of the study, maybe the participant feel uncomfortable and he or she wants to leave, so they should have the freedom to do so without any force or without any coercion. Ultimately, it should be voluntary participation. Second is informed consent. So it is essential that the participants in a study should understand what will happen to them during the study. Okay, and what treatment they will undergo during the study. So the principle of informed consent states that potential participants must receive this information before data from them are collected so that they make an informed decision about participation in the study. Because in some of the psychological experiments, electric shock is given to the participants during the experiment, while in some other cases, certain harmful or unpleasant stimuli are presented. So they may at times be required to give some private information as well, which is generally not shared with others. And in some studies, the technique of deception is used, in which the participants are given instructions to think or imagine in certain ways and are given false information or feedback about their performance. Okay, so when certain kind of false information or false feedback is given to the participants, of course it becomes very disturbing on the part of the participants as well, and that is regarded to be the technique of deception. Okay, and for this purpose it is very important that the participants are explained the nature of the study before its actual commencement. Okay, third is debriefing. Now say once the study is over, the participants are provided with necessary information to complete their understanding of research. And this is particularly important if deception has been used in the study. So when deception is used, of course, we are not using all truth, yes, because deception itself means that we are manipulating and we are giving certain kind of false information or false feedback about the performance of the participants. So if the participant is intelligent, we might say that you are not very intelligent, or we can say that you are incompetent. Okay, so those kind of feedback might be disturbing on the part of the participant. So debriefing ensures that participants leave the study in the same physical and mental state as when they entered. So there should not be any harm done to their physical and mental state because of the experiment or the study. So it should offer reassurance to the participants. So here the researcher should make efforts to remove any anxiety or other adverse effects that participants may have felt as a result of being deceived in the course of the study. Okay. So with debriefing, it is very important that the participants should understand that why and on what circumstances the study has been conducted. And the researcher should always keep in mind this ethic that there should not be any anxiety at the back of the mind of the participants when they are leaving the room. Okay. Fourth, sharing the results of the study. So in psychological research, after collecting information from the participants, we come back to our places of work, analyze the data and draw conclusions. And it is obligatory for the researcher to go back to the participants and share the results of the study with them. So when the researcher go for data collection, the participants develop certain expectations from the researcher, isn't it? Even if it had been you or me, we also have certain kind of expectation in order to know the result, the outcome. So one of the expectations is that uh, the researcher will tell them about their behavior that the researcher have investigated in the study. And as a researcher, it is his or her moral duty to go back to the participants. So this exercise of going back to the participant has two advantages. The first is that the researcher fulfill the expectations of the participants. Okay. And second, the participants may tell the researcher their opinion about the results, which sometimes may help the researcher develop some new insights. Okay, that means they're providing certain kind of supplementary information that might help the study of the researcher as a whole. Last, it is confidentiality of data sources. So the participants in a study have the right to privacy, and the researcher must safeguard their privacy by keeping the information provided by them in strict confidence. Okay, so the information should only be used for research purposes only, and in no circumstances it should be passed on to other interested parties. So here, the most effective way of protecting the confidentiality of the participants is not to record their identities. And this is, however, not possible in certain kinds of research. So in such cases, code numbers are given on the datasheet, and the names with the codes are kept separately. So the identification list should be destroyed as soon as the research is over. If required in future, the researcher should again get the consent of the participants that whether the data they have collected they can use it in public domain or not. And if the participant gives their consent that yes you can use it, then only the researcher should use it, otherwise it should not be used. And mostly it is important on the part of the researcher that after the study is over, the data that they have collected should be destroyed as evidence. No evidence should be there, just for the sake of the privacy policy of the participants. And if it is the case of minorities like minors, small children, then the consent should come from their parents. And even if they want to record the data, then they should not use names. Instead of names they should use numbers. So this is applicable in some cases but not in all cases. So these are 5 ethical issues that the researcher should keep in his mind, in his or her mind. Okay. So with this we have come to the end of this chapter, and we have covered many important topics so far. Here we have covered analysis of data, where we have discussed quantitative method and qualitative method, and very importantly limitations of psychological inquiry, where we got 3 limitations. And lastly we have ethical issues, where we got 5 principles, ethical principles, or we can say moral code of conduct, which the researcher should keep in mind. So this is the slide where I have prepared certain questions for you all to solve. So just try to go through the questions and try to answer by yourself. If you don't find any answers anywhere, then feel free to ask me. Okay? And regarding this chapter, if you have any query, any doubt, please feel free to ask me. Okay? So that's it. Thank you.